the time is right that we start the last panel discussion. And some of us actually did anticipate that the attention will be a little lower, because the competition to the audience in this room is in the next room, where we have 3 foreign ministers and a couple of other speakers discussing important topics. So I guess a lot of audience went into that room. So I would advise for all of you to come a little closer, because we would like to have this panel a lot more interactive. The topic is startup technologies. And we have a mixed panel, and like all other panelists in these 2 days, they are not really easy to define with just, let's say, one title or one line. So I will actually not even attempt to do that. You have their descriptions in today's edition of Blade Strategic Forum paper. So I will just do a short introduction and add a number that I came up with through the preparation research as I did for this panel. Maybe the panelists will agree on this number, maybe not, we'll see. We will do it in alphabetical order, which gives all the gentlemen the opportunity to allow me to start with lady. So Mateja Drmastia, she's currently with the ministry in Slovenia, Ministry for Economic Development and Technology. But in the last 4 years, she was the head, the CEO of Competence Center, Center of Excellency. The number that I chose for her, since she's now in the ministry, which represents the government, the Republic of Slovenia, I actually took the budget of Slovenia, which has 2 numbers. One is the income side and the outcome side, and obviously, unfortunately, the numbers are not equal, so the outcome side is bigger than the income, but roughly about 8.5 billion on one side, 9.5 billion on the other side. That just so that we know of how big organizations we're talking about in terms of impact and what actually can be done. So this is the Slovenian budget. Yeah. The next one, we have Mr. Deep Kapurya, and those of you who were here during the last panel have heard his opinion, and there was a lot of it. It was actually a very vibrant discussion on Indian cooperation with Central Europe. He's the head of, I can say, his own group, the high-tech group, which the number I chose is, which is on the level of about $100 million, if I looked right in your presentation. But then again, he's also representative of the Confederation of Indian Industry, which could have maybe a bigger number, because it's a confederation of a lot of companies in India. Then we have Jure Leskovec from Stanford University. He's assistant professor, and the rest you have written in there. And the number I chose for Jure is Stanford's budget, which is interesting when you compare it to Slovenia's budget. And I already see a comment coming here from Mateja. So Stanford's budget is, if I looked right the number, last year's, I think it was $4.5 billion, right? Well, I did the research. So compare the Slovenian overall country budget of 8.5 billion and then the Stanford, so in terms of impact. Then we have Mr. Nicolas Zimmer, and the number that I chose is, and he's from Technologie Stiftung, the Technology Foundation, in Berlin, which is very tightly linked to the city of Berlin. And so I chose the number 20 billion euros. So comparing to Stanford and Slovenia as a country, that's the budget of Berlin, right? And actually for you, I have 2 numbers, because I saw that Berlin as a city is investing around 3.5 billion in research and development. So comparing, a city, a country, and a university, somewhere there. And then we have also Jaka Levstek, a company of about million and a half, but actually helping a lot of startups, which will eventually be also in bigger numbers. Now, I was hoping that none of us will actually have ties, because we're talking about technology, R&D, and startups, but I was wrong. Jure disappointed me a little bit because I've never seen him with a tie, and now he has a tie because he came to Blade Strategic Forum, and then also Jakan never has a tie. Now he has a tie. But for Mr. Kapuria, I knew that he would have a tie. So we will have a mixed one, but definitely a less tied up panel than the previous one. Now, the thing that we touch on a daily basis, by far the most, every day, now in the last couple of years, is what? Is this. Everybody is touching this at least a couple of times every hour. So we don't touch our loved ones and kids as much as we touch this, okay? Now, most of these things are assembled and manufactured in your northern neighbor, in China. But the stuff that we see, and actually the stuff that we touch, more than 90% of it is being built and developed in about 100 kilometers around where you are. So we have iPhones, we have Android, we have a lot of stuff running on here, built and researched and developed in Silicon Valley. So a provocation, all of us, the rest of the panelists, we should like stand up and sit there, and we should listen to Jure from Stanford, what innovation actually is all about, how Silicon Valley is doing it, because this is pretty much the perception of the heads in all of us, like Facebook, Google, iPhone, everything is there, the innovation is happening there. But it's not really the case. So we will not be talking that much about the Silicon Valley and Stanford and what's happening there, but what it actually is also happening elsewhere and the challenges. And I would like to turn now to Mateja Dermastia. So Europe has challenges, and how are we tackling it in Europe with policies, with centers of excellences? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You frustrated me a little bit. I didn't know that I'm so heavy and have so much power. And actually, I cannot do much. But in any case, yes, Europe has a big problem, and all European Commission and everybody is trying to figure out what is wrong with the Europe. I have an opportunity to work a little bit in States, not like Jure, not like in UK, Jaka, but what is the big difference is that they invest not in the technology, they invest in teams, they invest in other sorts of innovations, and Europe is putting a lot of money into the technology. And I'm probably the only one in this panel who is coming at the moment from the policy-making environment. And we figure out, and Europe figure out that this time that will a little bit turn around the story, which was heavily investing on the technology, heavily investing on the research, but didn't do much on the innovation side. And this is, you mentioned a little bit the center of excellence and different tools that policy can use. It depends how effective it is on the using such tools, But it will be a process which will turn around Europe, not much UK, which is doing okay, and maybe Sweden is doing okay, and Germany is doing actually okay, but on a different ways, It's an issue how the Slovenia will entering in this community. And yeah, so Europe is turning from the investing heavily in the technology, start investing in the innovation. And I'm pretty much sure that from Stanford and UK and Germany, and also from India, we can share a lot of good experience. And what we have to do in Slovenia is learn how to really change our culture and become really open. And become open in the way that we are capable to talk to the people and cooperate with the people who are not in our community and have different opinions. And this is the big challenge, and you're asking me also, we discussed a little bit by the mail, where all this idea, and let's say mobiles, okay? We can deal with mobiles. I have a very small talk with Jaka before. We do have an excellent community on ICT in Slovenia, but the issue is, do we have a community that we can link the ICT to the industry and to the needs of the society, let's say of the city or maybe of the industry, how to go to the industry 4.0 and things like this. So there is a lot of challenges, and If there is a specific questions how to deal with this, we can go really in detail, but maybe a little bit later on.
Okay, thank you. As I said in the beginning, we want to have this as interactive as possible, especially because none of the speakers and none of the panels themselves are here for their own sake. We are here only because of you. So whenever you have a comment, something to add, just raise a hand and we're going to have a mic immediately there for you, because especially since the group is pretty small, we can have this more interactive. Now moving on to Mr. Kapurian, again a little more provocative. We see two stunning cars parked outside. Okay, one is parked all the time, which is accidentally because BMW is a sponsor here, and there's Tesla sponsored. Tesla parked an Italian guest, and then we have two BMW i3s, running around. And I did the test drive also. I love all these cars. I love Tesla. I love i3, and I know you have production capacities in the automotive industry, as you were explaining before. When can we expect, instead of Tesla and i3 parked in front of the hotel where the next Bled Strategic Forum, I don't know, 2020, 2030, an Indian car where we would love to test drive it, where most of the components will be built by high-tech group?
That's an interesting thought. However, how the auto industry operates is mainly the assemblers, and there's a huge value chain. And today, there's nothing called an Indian car or even an American car. So let me just talk about how the supply chains are functioning and how the technology flow is also happening. So for example, if you're using a General Motors four-wheel drive SUV anywhere in the world except for China, they would be geared by our gears. If you're driving a General Motors, a Chrysler, which is a Dodge Ram with a Cummins engine, then the engine gears are from us as a single source. So there's already made in India, made by high-tech stamp on numerous such components. Daimler, number of the trucks of the mid-size are geared by our drivetrain, not only in India, but now getting there in Germany and Fuso in Japan. So the flow of technology, and let me tell you about it, that how this was indigenized. I mean, that would be more of a context, I would guess, in this conference. That in conventional and more brick and mortar companies, the technology flows and gets indigenized in the location and where it is. So you can't just simply transplant it. It is very difficult for adaptation, and one has to go through a huge amount of iterations. In a brick and mortar company, there are issues not of deep engineering, that is one, but major issue is the people issue, that how they absorb technology, what they do with it, and how they actually deploy it to manufacture goods which are to be supplied, which have huge consequential damages if something goes wrong. I just talk about the conventional part. Do you want me to get to more depth, or would that?
Please do.
Yeah. Now, in that sense, we have imbibed numerous work ethics and numerous kind of technologies, and I would just like to sort of more demystify this technology as on a shop floor. One is the process technology, one is the product technology, and finally it is the shop floor technology of how you manage the workflows on the shop. So that in itself is technology. So a breakthrough can happen everywhere. If, for example, we run on our shop floor something called the Hyjunka system. I don't know how many of you would be familiar with that, but that's a Toyota Production System word, which means the work is loaded on the machines as and when it is required. The change of tooling happens in less than 10 minutes, so the utilization of the machines are very high, and that's technology for you as far as shop floor management is concerned. And we try to have a single workflow of lean technology, and that's our company is awarded the Shingo Prize for that. It's a Shingo Silver. We are striving for this Shingo Gold. All our companies are with the JIPM TPM award. That's of a second grade, so you need to work a lot on the machines. So the machines are robust enough to produce quality and consistently time on time. So that's another set of technology. So processes break through, tools break through, dies, how they are put together, the jigs and fixtures, all that need to come together to produce a highly engineered precision gear. And prior to that, a lot of engineering goes into the process drawings. As to, once a prototype is made, we are asked to make that gear on production machines, and that's a totally different ballgame. So making a tool room kind of prototype to a final production, which needs to be very consistent and executable, and which at the customer end needs to be less than 10 ppm of rejections, needs a highly precision kind of clockwork, kind of structured way and systems where it needs to operate.
Thank you. The very reason why I wanted you to go a little more into details is to bring you to the magic word which you actually did use without us being agreed on this. So you used the magic word lean, which is my home ground. And now I'm going to do a round trip from Japan to get to Yaka. So you mentioned Toyota Production System, which is the lean production system, which the whole thing started back in the 60s and 70s. And I know through your corporate presentation that you have this in your shop floor as you just described. But then a spark went from the Toyota Production System, from lean production, back to Silicon Valley, where Steve Blank and Eric Ries started, looking at this and then bringing it together with customer development, and then the whole lean startup was born. And now I need to go all the way back to Japan. So the whole lean startup also infected the startup community in Europe, in Slovenia also. And it just so happened that I'm consulting a startup which is actually doing business, and they moved to Japan. So we, as Slovenian company, are exporting lean startup to Japan. Now, I know that this whole lean startup and customer development is a very home ground also to Yaka. So a question to you is now your view on relationship between the technology development and business development, the customer development. I know that this is where you operate.
Yeah. Well, I would start, I think, with claiming that I would say that the lean concept and the lean startup made a much smaller dent in Europe than it actually did in the States and outside of the world. I would say it's more or less for two reasons, which I think is really important for us to understand. And one is that a lot of startups, and especially lots of young entrepreneurs around here, still have a huge fear of how to prove that their product idea, their business idea makes sense at all. In the ideal scenario, they would lock themselves in a room and think about this really deeply for a while, until they would come to a conclusion, which is that the buyers either like it or don't like it. So whereas lean would want them to go outside more and more, this is still sort of a difficult concept for lots of entrepreneurs here to grasp. And this is part of the reason why lean never worked, or still doesn't work as well in the EU ecosystem compared to the US. The second reason, however, I think it's even more painful, and that is that in order for you to get any benefit from the lean approach, it should be about building a repeatable and scalable business model and scalable companies, right? Now, that's all fine and dandy, but if your goal is to build something that's going to employ people to that hill just behind us, which is, in a way, a limitation of our own imagination, then seriously, there's no point in scalability because, I'll just hire both of my friends and that's it. That's my vision of the company. The fragmentation of EU doesn't help in that particular case, right? And what's even more worrisome is actually that whole scalability issue causes now that most of successful European startups, the moment that they get with the market validation in their home country, one of the two, UK or Germany essentially, they would not go to the next EU country, they would not go to the EU market, they would go to the States, right? So let's say that the range that the lean approach can actually make is very much connected to the topology of the market, to the culture, of the ecosystem, of the ambition around. And lean just provides a tool for people that want to or are capable of thinking about their vision. Without that, no new methodology, whether it's lean or whether it's design thinking or even more back to the past, will not actually help. Even more interesting is the fact that lean on its own is a concept of, okay, here we have a technology, now let's find the market for that, right? Whereas here, the statement would still be, here we have a technology, let's make the best technology in the world. Who will use it? If you build it, they will come.
Before I go to Nicholas, if anybody has any comment from the audience or from the panel, just feel free. Now, with Nicholas, I don't have, you do? Please.
I don't know how far to get into this, but I'd like to tell you a story around this, which is of my son and exactly what really happened. My younger son is from Carnegie Mellon Robotic Institute. He did his master's, then he was a researcher, and then he was in the PhD program. And he, along with a couple of guys, thought of a startup. He had a chat with his professor, and they started a small company in Pittsburgh. He has written a number of papers on AI and vision. He was a part of the DARPA Grand Challenge, which CMU won a number of times. He was part of Mars Rover. He was also part of the foot soldier in the AI and vision part of it, which DARPA was working on with numerous universities. I am a first-gen entrepreneur, and his older brother was already back in India, and he thought that, here I have a set of technologies which really excite, so why don't I get back to India, and everybody would just want it. So when I met him in Pittsburgh, he said, Dad, I have this great technologies, I can build robots, I can do this, and the Indian Army is going to want it, the industry is going to want it, you are going to want it on the shop floor, and it's going to work like that. I said, great. So we talked to his guide, and he said, okay, here you are, so let's get back to India. So we got him back to India. He got around one or two people from Pittsburgh. He went around the colleges, the ITIs, which are very famous for technology. He got a few people, and he started off with 25 people and started his work. And his first was that I'm going to make an advanced driver assisting system, which is going to be active and a passive safety device for the cars. I have the technology, I have it, and I'm going to get it done like this. I just kept watching because I did not want to discourage him. I knew, gone through life with business, I knew that he's yet not familiar with any failure. So I knew I didn't want to stifle his energy, so I said, let it go. After 3 months, I said, have you got, I could open a lot of doors because of, we were already servicing a lot of customers, auto customers. I said, have you talked to the Tatas? Have you talked to the Mahindras? Have you talked to Maruti for this? No. My technology is ready. I have tried it on my car. My guys have worked on it. Here is the whole concept. Here it is running and stuff. I said, please go to the customer. I will do it. Don't worry, Dad. I'm going to do it. So at the end of the quarter, obviously it was privately funded. It's the 100 million you mentioned. That's part of the private company, but we have equal amount coming from our private companies. So I was funding him, and after 2 quarters, when my CFO showed me the account, it was $2 million down, and yet the product was yet in some kind of a stage which was yet to get to the market. So I knew that this is the way it's going to happen. I didn't haul him up, but when he went to the customers, he was astounded that nobody wanted that product. It was Continental which is a large MNC, was offering a similar product and BMW had this going in some of the cars, and the cost of the product was 25% of the Conti product, but still the customer wouldn't want it because there were huge issues in terms of, it's a driver assistance. If it's departure from the lane in India, in some of the roads there are no lanes. So the guy said, you're looking for a lane, there is no lane. So he had to go back and start working on end of the road. Finally, he first found this major failure which impacted him, that here I am, I've totally failed. And he was so depressed, I can't even tell you, that he was so down and out. I said, guys, come on. You've been a success in academics. He was a first-rater everywhere. He did his master's in, it was supposed to be done in 2 years. He did it in nearly 1 year. So he was a great researcher. He was a great PhD program, and always, drawing number 1 by all his profs. He's now adjunct faculty to CMU, but he had never faced failure. And it was a shock. And it's easy to say it, but it really is a transformational paradigm for a kid who is always used to success in technology. And what Jakob was saying, I just need to elaborate that this process of science getting into first a proof of concept to a basic product, which is basically a pilot, to pilot proving, is a totally different ball game than the production shops, because I knew that. Once that is, you're trying to evolve something, you're trying to search something, you're trying to research something, and on the other end, you're executing, which needs to be highly, highly structured. And he has a mindset of a CTO. He would just love to be there. His people are just working overnight. They have no clue of time. They're just with large sets of screens all around them, and that's where they are working. So subsequent to that, our evolution was that how can we have to first accept failure, and that is the essence. Beyond that was that how to fail less. and how to convert this technology where the customer actually wants it. So first he started going around to the customers. Nobody wanted this active system, active safety system. So he translated the UGV which he had done, built autonomous car, and his colleague is now the one who is running the Google car in Google. So he then used that technology to make a more industrial product. And I said, here is our company, why don't you talk to our engineers and say what they need on the shop floor? So he developed an automated guided vehicle for transporting materials. And today, after 4 years, he found success by replacing the AGV of a Swiss maker in Volvo in India, where all the engine assembly of Volvo is actually happening on his automated guided vehicle with all the child parts coming there. So that was the success. So, and there are numerous other such examples where failure after failure after failure. So the issue was, the paradigm shift was that we have to accept failure. And it's easier said because money is getting burnt at both ends. It's not easy. I mean, somehow, as a father, one can say that, okay, one was saying that, okay, I believed in him and kept investing, but would a VC do it? Would a PE do it? I don't think so. They would just pull up the guy and say, we are pulling the plug out of you. It doesn't work like that. So every year we spent close to about $5 million for last 4 years doing nothing.
Really doing nothing?
In terms of a VC. In terms of a VC. But here now, he has the army where he has converted a tank into a UGV. 4 tanks have been tried in the desert at 65 degrees. They have successfully worked. We are the largest today manufacturers of AGV in the country. And thus, the success is now visible. And is he meeting all the expenses? He has 350 engineers working with him. Is he meeting the bottom line? Not yet. Not yet. So, but he has broken even.
Okay, short comment from my side, and then we need to give a word also to Nicholas and Jure. You were mentioning the fails and the successes, and while the fails are so linked to negative feelings and emotions, and it was a downer for your son, as you said, my favorite is sometimes we succeed, sometimes we learn, and then there's no fail in it. And basically, while it was a failure in terms of wrong expectation, it was a huge learning. Yeah. And you said in the beginning you had your concerns, but you still let your son go because he all he knew so far was successes and go. And just recently there was a video interview published by Elon Musk, and his attitude toward this is similar to what you had with your son. So I just wanted to comment this. Yeah, you should try, even if the probable outcome is failure. So in that sense, you are already close to the Tesla outside. Yeah? So yeah. There is some link.
This is a befitting name is Tesla. I mean, befitting name is Tesla.
Yeah, he was doing that. Yeah, yeah.
He was the guy.
Yeah. Okay, Nicholas. Now to you. Since I don't have a specific question for you, as we already agreed, you will give a perspective on what was already said so far. In a mix of different roles that you had, a former IP lawyer turned state secretary turned innovation strategist turned founder and CEO of a startup. So what's your view on what was just said? And with a Berlin background.
Yeah, thank you. The first thing that comes to my mind is actually, you have to fail often and you have to fail fast. I think it's a question of speed. And no offense given, but I mean, that was a mistake when you gave your son too much money to let's say, to avoid the test of the reality. And I think that's an important point. So what you can learn from that is, I think that although the numbers are very impressive when you see how much money Berlin spends, on the other hand, it's not money that we are giving entrepreneurs for nothing. It's quite easy to get seed funding in Germany, especially in Berlin. That means when you have a business idea and you have a more or less viable business plan, it shouldn't be a problem to get 200K. But when you want to get further, then you will have to prove that your concept is working. And I think that's very important. What we cannot do is that we do subsidies, yeah, for people who want to lean back in their seats and get some kind of, let's say, social welfare for founders. Because that's sometimes a mindset you especially find in Germany. The German society works on a model which is, on one hand, a good one, because maybe you remember the discussion we had yesterday about trust in one of the special panels. And Sonja Just mentioned that in Germany you don't have to be afraid that you won't have to eat anything after you failed. That's true, and I think it's important that people are not overly anxious because they fear that when they fail, there would be a total fail and drop out of society. But on the other hand, I think it's important that when you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to accept that failure is part of what you're doing. And you have to be willing to be disruptive. No incremental changes, but you want to kill an industry. That's the mindset you need when you want to grow really big. And you only foster that when you keep people hungry, in my opinion. So I'd say that one of the things that Berlin made what it is now is exactly the scarcity of resources we had after the reunification. Because when Berlin was reunified, you had two parts of the city. West Berlin, which was very fed up with subsidies, which ended from one day to another. And then you had the former eastern part of Berlin, which had to be rebuilt. And due to the fact that the Berlin government actually, and yeah, I think I'm allowed to say this as a former member of the Berlin government, although this was not my government which failed, but the government failed to a certain degree. It was not able to cope with the fact that Berlin wouldn't strive within 2 or 3 years, but it would take 10 years to 15 years until you have an economic development which is sustainable. And this failure of the state and the budget cuttings we had in Berlin led to the fact that there was a lot of free space. People were conquering that free space. You know, when you went in Berlin 10 years ago, there were a lot of free, actually literally free space. People were just starting clubs there and starting whatever there. And that was what made Berlin a huge enterprise, a huge startup. People were just trying things out. And I think that this is another important lesson. You have to, two things are important for creativity, and creativity is what makes an entrepreneur and makes you successful. It's scarcity, to one point, and on the other hand, it's freedom. You need the freedom that you can try things out. I must admit that this is something which is especially true when you are in a business which scales fast due to the fact that you don't need any lab space, you don't need any production. When you are a web entrepreneur, then it's quite easy. You just need Wi-Fi and you need a laptop, that's all you need. It's significantly more difficult when you want to start a biotech startup or an engineering startup. And that's where Berlin indeed invests a lot of money. That's true. We have 4 universities in Berlin, 20 universities of applied science, 70 non-university research institutions, which are funded by the state. So when you're looking into the numbers, we have in Berlin 18,000 people who are working in non-university research facilities. And that's doubled the number we have people working in engineering when it comes to machine engineering in Berlin. And that tells you a lot about Berlin. We are investing a lot of money into the brain of the people, into the brains of the people, and we are doing it from the state side. Compared to other German Bundesländer, Berlin is not comparable to Baden-Württemberg, for example, or to Bavaria, which are very strong economically. There are only two German states that are meeting the Lisbon criterion for spending budget on education, science, and research. It's Berlin and it's Baden-Württemberg. And when you're looking into the numbers in Baden-Württemberg, it's 60% from the private sector and 40% from the state sector. In Berlin, it's just vice versa. So Berlin is actually doing what Berlin small medium-sized companies are not doing, investing into research which is then transformed into technology. So I'd say that everything that helps to bring that ideas into action is something which is, and I see that Slovenia is doing this, is making a lot of sense. Because not everybody who has a bright idea is also somebody who's hungry enough to kill an industry. And to leverage that potential, you need some kind of transformational infrastructure. That means you can bring the idea to people who can do something out of it, or you can bring the people who are willing to do something to the people who have the ideas. And I think the best is when you put them together in one campus and force them to work together in some way. And that's what we are doing in Berlin in several areas that we have, like Adlershof, for example, or Buch, where we have university facilities, we have startups, we have companies. And the interesting thing is that when people interface somehow, when they're just sitting together having lunch or dinner, they come up with new ideas. And I think that's something which is also, when you're talking about competence centers in Slovenia, I think that this might make sense. Although one of the problems might be in Slovenia that it is a rather small country compared to Berlin. I mean, we have 3.5 million inhabitants, you have 2. And Berlin is a very international city. That's something which is also not to forget. When you compare that to other, especially German cities, you can live in Berlin without speaking any word of German. When you go to Kreuzberg, then Turkish will do, although this is not the most thriving part of Berlin when it comes to startups, although there are a lot of Turkish startups. Or when you go to Rosenthaler Platz, for example, Mitte, Torstraße, St. Oberholz, probably somebody has heard of the St. Oberholz, that is the center of the startup universe in Berlin. It's a, it's a cafe, basically. People just speak English. You have a lot of English-speaking guys. You have Americans, you have English people, but you have a lot of people, especially from Central Europe. And that is another part of the success story. People coming from Slovenia, from Croatia, from Serbia, looking for good paid jobs, which are less good paid than in the United States, but easier to get. That's something which fuels also our digital economy, that we have bright young minds coming to Berlin because it's quite easy. It's cheap to live in Berlin, and they get better paid than at home, but they get less paid than in America or in London. So that's basically how we're working at the moment. So you see this is something which can change, of course, because the more a city is economically thriving, the higher the rents are getting, the higher the cost of living are getting, and that's something that we clearly see, that it might come to an end in the next 5 to 10 years, and there might be another city in Europe or another country in Europe that runs up. That's something you have to face, but hey, that's life. I mean, that's again, you have to, a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit. Competition helps you in this way.
Thank you. You gave me 2 triggers to transition to Jure. First, you were mentioning you put them together and you force them to work together. I don't think that anybody's forcing anybody to do anything in Silicon Valley. I think there's another drive. And then also, you said like maybe the story is going to be over in 5 to 10 years in Berlin, and then some other city will pop up. On the other hand, I don't think that Silicon Valley will ever go down. It will be sort of like this. Now, obviously provocative. Now, we were talking about how we are, failing, struggling, trying to figure out what's the right way. While on the other hand, we have daily, weekly news of successes, although there are, thousands of failures also in Silicon Valley, like Twitch was just, acquired for about $1 billion by Amazon. Again, smack in Silicon Valley. Now, tell us, what's actually going there? What's the magic formula?
I don't know. So I should start this way. So I've been now at Stanford for 5 years. When I got my PhD, I was kind of ready to go back to Slovenia, but just kind of for a joke, I also applied a bit around. And then I landed this professorship. And I'm like super excited, and I was very surprised in what kind of environment I came. As a PhD student, we send, and the same we do at Stanford, right? Like kind of every summer, we send our students to work with industry. And in computer science, we kind of send them to Google's, Microsoft's, Amazon's, Facebook's, Twitter's, LinkedIn's, and things like that, right? And basically, what this allows us to do inside university is to kind of see what are the problems these companies are having, and then we can kind of work on those. And what that helps us in some way is that we can kind of work on cutting edge science that actually has a customer. And when I say a customer, I mean someone who cares about us solving that problem. And this way, we basically work with various kinds of companies to kind of, we basically many times kind of work for free because we want to work on cool problems. So we want to talk to them. Many times, for example, they would give us data so that we can then test our methods on their data. And for example, in my group, I do social media and social networks kind of analytics. We get complete access to Facebook data. And then we build predictive models of what will go viral on Facebook. And that's kind of new science that we do, and we write about it in scientific journals and conferences. And Facebook is happy that somebody else looks at their data and tells them kind of things they don't know. So this is kind of how we operate. And before you were mentioning Stanford has a 4.1 billion budget, right? So for example, my group is around 25 people, and we are around $3 million per year. And none of that money comes from Stanford, right? I have to raise that money either in industry, from government, somewhere, right? So in some sense, I'm kind of running my small little company. In some sense, I can be very frustrated, right? Because I have these workers, I train them, but after 5 years, they leave, right? I mean, they got their PhD and they are off on their own. So in some sense, it's kind of like having a startup where everyone works on their own project because it's science. People are leaving constantly. We have to cope with that, but we are having lots of fun. And one thing I'd say, I think what makes the Silicon Valley magical is that the first thing is it's sun every day and no clouds, and that makes it great. But the other thing is that there is kind of lots of trust, and it's very easy to work with companies. And I can tell you stories. For example, we wanted to look at newspaper articles and how people comment and upvote and downvote and see how that affects user behavior and so on. And I was talking to our national television. They have the news site and so on. And it took forever. And then I sent an email to CNN.com, and like 2 weeks later, I get all their data, right? So it's much easier. Similar, we were talking to this German company, Zing, which is kind of a LinkedIn competitor. Again, it was like back and forth and IP and this and that. Then LinkedIn comes and says like, here's our laptop, please see what you can do, right? So kind of, and that's why we like working kind of, with whoever has interesting data and interesting problems, but our life is short and we don't want to waste it in some bureaucracy. And in that way, for example, Stanford as a university is very, very relaxed and very open to us working with industry. Kind of, we don't worry about the IP because so intellectual property, because the world moves so fast that before lawyers figure it out, it's already old and nobody cares about it. And we have this way of doing it such that we can still publish, work on problems, and some of these things then get implemented and solve problems in companies. And then, of course, the way you work with companies is different, right? With bigger ones, is very different than working with young startups. Our students go create companies, then they invite us on their technical advisory boards usually, so we kind of get a small share and we advise. And kind of the hard problems they maybe don't have time to look into much depth, we spawn that as research projects at the university. We publish the findings, the implementations go to the startup. Usually the university also gets a small share of the startup, so kind of it's also in the university's best interest that those guys succeed and so on and so forth. But kind of what we are doing is kind of having lots of fun and working on problems that are hard, but kind of solve someone's trouble, and we are having lots of fun. So I think that's kind of the bottom line.
Good. 2 things. Can you give me this booklet just for a second? About problem solving. All of you have had this situation, most probably already during these 2 days. Oh, I don't have my business card anymore. Like, give me yours and I'll send you email, blah, blah, follow up, and then it never happens. When I met Jure, when he just came and we started discussing, he was writing something here, and then another one. And then I looked and he said, I'm writing my business cards. So he doesn't have his, I don't know, forgot, lost, whatever, but he was solving the problem. He was writing his email address on this and then giving it. So he solved the problem. While in the parts of the world where the problem solving is not as intense as in Silicon Valley, we would create excuses. I don't have it right now. I got out of business cards. What now? Just write it and give it. Why should it be? So this is one thing. Now, a comment probably from you on the IP, like the world is turning so fast so that the IP doesn't really matter. I guess there are different views. Thanks. You need to turn it off. Yeah.
Yeah, to give a typical lawyer answer, it depends. It depends on the field where you're working in. I'm totally with you when it comes to working with IT and media. It doesn't make any sense, in my opinion, to patent something. I mean, in Europe and especially in Germany, it's very hard to patent processes, and so you are barely unable to patent any software. That's completely different from the United States. But in my opinion, the only thing that will help you is you scale fast and you are able to conquer a market. And anything else is absolutely uninteresting. The only IP that's interesting for a startup in the, let's say, in the digital business is trademarks, for example. It's design. That might be things that might be useful to protect. It's a completely different story when you're working on engineering and when you're working on biotech pharma. Especially in biotech pharma, you have that regulatory issues that you need years until you are able to bring your product to the market. And you must be able to protect your IP in this period of time before you are able to getting back any money out of it you invested in it. So I'd say the patent gets less interesting as a less good indicator for the innovative power of a region. But there are still some branches where it's absolutely necessary to use patents to protect your work until you're able to enter the market. It's just a question of how fast can you go into the market with your product, I'd say.
I completely agree. I think one thing I would say is that, for example, for a company to work successfully with a university, it's, for example, in some sense, much more fruitful to go engage with a professor, work on a particular project, get the student excited, educate them, and this way basically we custom train workers for the companies. Now, patents and IP of course is an issue, but that's kind of where you want to move very fast. You kind of want to put that aside. And most of the patents, the way I see it, it's kind of used as kind of as cannons that are never fired, right? It's more, I have 7, you have 5, and then it says, okay, let's not go to court. Few patents get really kind of sold or licensed, right? Stanford had this patent that kind of on PageRank, which is what kind of made Google successful, right? That's one thing that got patented and so on. But again, research was done ahead of time, it was actually published, the algorithm is there and so on. From our point of view, for example, we had this collaboration with Facebook a few years ago when, for example, friend recommendation engine, so people you may know, right? It's the core technology they have. That, basically, we developed together with them, we were able to publish, and there is a version of that used to run at Facebook. And of course, kind of what we published wasn't exactly what ran there, and our thing was kind of not scalable and ran only on small social networks, but they have 1 billion people there. So there are all these issues that we just didn't write about, but happened there. So there are kind of ways to still do innovation very fast and iterate very quickly.
Sure. Go on.
May I comment? It's yesterday we started preparing a little bit the panel, and when Yuri came up, I said, okay, yeah, exactly. He will tell everything, but what we really have to do today, and I'm strictly here from the innovation policy point of view, but they tell you everything. It's about how to bring idea to the market, and you need engineers. Without them, I don't know how to do it. And then is that, yeah, how to be a failure in our country. You can fail or you can go. And then what I like about the Berlin, and I knew Berlin very well, yeah, it's international community, and this is something that we have to bring together. It's about the international community. It doesn't matter how, we have to find the tools how to do it. And yeah, the sun in Silicon Valley make the difference. And what I don't think that we can bring to Europe is this smile and have fun. What you are keep talking to, and everybody in Silicon Valley is talking to, it's have fun. And when you come to idea in Europe, let's have fun, because we will have do the business, no one wanna have fun. And it's about let's go to our laboratory and think and work on the technology and doing and doing and doing, and it will be perfect. And no one will want it. And this is something that from the innovation policy point of view and from the government in Europe and Slovenia, we really have to make the big difference. Let's have fun, yes, exactly, and try to find the money to bring technology to the market. It will be a big issue for Slovenia, but I think that we are on the way to solve somehow with the people that you listen. I have nothing to add on this anymore.
I tend to be always very upbeat and positive and constructive and so on, but I'm going to use this moment to be a little critical. I'm not going to name any names, but those of you who know will know exactly who I'm talking about. I'm organizer of the TEDx Ljubljana, a TEDx event for a couple of years now, and we are just right now finishing up the speaker lineup for our November event. Okay, and halfway through we just realized, oh, we're missing tech, science, geeky topics. We have business, social all covered. And then we said, wow, we need this big push. And I personally sent a note to both directors of two biggest research institutes, which are the founders of Polymath. I will not name any names. No answers in 1 month and a half from neither of them. I guess this would not happen in Silicon Valley because he got it from CNN like in 2 weeks, and then from Delo or whoever it was. You didn't get it. So this kind of attitude we are missing, okay? So since...
You even had an answer from India.
The thing is, I mean, both two institutes, just ignored us totally. And then we said, okay, so there are other institutes, other labs where there's geeky stuff that we can use. So we turned to the university. And at that point, I would, again, invite anybody who has comments and questions, just raise their hand. Until you will need to listen now, because maybe you will have a comment on this. So we turned to universities, obviously, the Faculty of Computer Science and Electrical Engineers and so on. And we got a bunch of really good candidates, and we had really good meetings, and we're going to have them on stage in November. One of them we just had yesterday from Computer Vision Lab. And we were discussing exactly the stuff that you were talking about. So, and he was talking a lot about also Google cars and this and that. And I was just driving during holidays a BMW who has this, lane shifting and braking and so on. And I know what Mercedes S is doing and so on. And then it was interesting because this guy, he was so passionate. He knew so much about it. And I said, well, what are you guys doing in your lab that is really worth mentioning, talking about? And is this going to be commercialized or what? Or are you guys just being in the lab? And unfortunately, the answer wasn't that encouraging. Now, this is now getting to probably you and whoever, what do we need to do? What kind of policy? I don't know. And I know, Till, you're doing something with Yes, how to get this, let's make fun, let's push thing out, let's spin out this stuff. So whoever wants to comment on this, I got a little frustrated here, yeah.
This is also, I'm on the board of government industry association, which is called Global Innovation and Alliance, Innovation and Alliance. It is an acronym which is called GITA, which is, 49% of the equity has come in from the Ministry of Science and Technology, and 51% from the industry, and I am also a equity contributor to this company. And we facilitate the bilateral funds. We have a bilateral agreement with a lot of countries. So what was happening is that when it was the ministries who were functioning, they were highly bureaucratic. The money, as and when it was required, was never given to the entrepreneur. He had, his idea would finally sort of peter out, or he would lose interest, or something like that would happen. So finally, the government thought that let this be run by the private industry, by CII members. So we have 10 CII members who contributed to the equity of 51%. And now the Indo-Canadian Fund, the Indo-Israeli Fund, the Indo-UK Fund, and we have, I think, Indo-German Fund is all getting routed through this entity. And we are very quick at sanctions. And the other thing, as an institution, when we are sitting on the board, we accept failures. So if the output doesn't happen, we fully understand that where he is coming from. And I must also correct you that it was not as easy for him to get funds from me. You know, there was a board. There was a board which was instituted, which was totally, and he had to answer to that board. But the measurables became different. So just to bring forth that point. So here also we have tried to bring together some kind of measures which are not only measures of the bottom line. So it's a different measure of success, which also includes failures, has been institution, and there is you can go to that site, Gita site, and it has very elaborate process as to how to apply for the funds, and it is done within weeks. So you don't have to wait for years or something like that, which earlier people would do. And you know, I think this is one part where I really appreciate what Germany has actually done. And there's this university environment and there's this industry. Most of the countries do not have anything in the middle, and that is where highly appreciative of what Germany has done is likes of Fraunhofer. We, as in the conventional part, we are engaged with Fraunhofers. They do not do anything for free. It's not pro bono. So you have to pay for the research. Whatever you get done, they help you get to the process or to the product in a very, very clear way. There are professionals there. There are testing labs there. So there are about 65 of these Fraunhofers specialized in various. And many countries, including UK and US, have tried to sort of replicate them, but somehow failed. We are trying our own attempt in India. I don't know whether we are going to fail. And like what you said, small failures, but I don't know how that's going to happen. I also had the opportunity to address the Berlin Chamber of Commerce and visited the Adlershof, which was Berlin Adlershof, and which was the Humboldt University and all. And I was just amazed to see how this innovation and technology and how it is getting to the market kind of functioning. So I think it'll be a good idea for Slovenia to visit a couple of these places.
Just first comment from her side, and then.
It's just, I'm extremely happy that you're here today, because the first time when I came to the office at the ministry in the end of April, there was a paper there. We would like to make the technology bridge with India. We would like to cooperate with Gita. So in the last 6 months, I mean, it's bureaucracy because it's internal procedures and the three ministries are involved, but we are on the way to make the agreement, or we are looking forward to do this bridge on the technologies with the Gita. So we can talk later, and I'm very happy to meet you.
Just a quick comment on the fun factor. I think that this is something which is not the same in Berlin as in Silicon Valley, because we have less sun. But it's a fact that Berlin is attractive for young people because you can have fun there. And you cannot divide the rise of the startup city Berlin from Berlin as a cultural, but also as a real fun city. Because when you want to attract young people who do things because they like to do things, they want to have an environment where they have positive emotion around them, positive sentiments. And I think that this is a part of the secret of Berlin. And that's also a part of the secret of Amsterdam, for example. And they're doing also really well. You can go through the cities that have a substantial startup ecosystem, and you will always see it's also a cultural, it's also a club scene, it's also a recreational area all around, and that's something which is of importance. And the fact that you have the ability to interact with large companies is something we lack in Berlin. And when you look into Berlin, startups, they're usually not on the big data, they're more on the creative side. And that's yeah, you know, we have bread and butter and all that fashion week stuff in Berlin. And that's the reason why we are more oriented on the question of creativity, because that's something where they can interact with and they can play with. We don't, if we had a Google or Facebook, it might have been different. Another short comment to the Fraunhofer. I think that Fraunhofer is a very important institution, as well as Helmholtz and all the other non-university institutions. And the fact that Fraunhofer is very much trimmed to raise their own funds. I mean, basically they get 30% from the state and 70% they have to get anywhere else. That helps, because they are only doing things that are going to the market. And then we are again at the market question. It does not make too much sense to invent things that will never see the daylight. Yeah, and we should just learn that apart from the fact that it's also of importance that there is some academic interest in things. I don't say that we should stop that. That's not the question. The question is, when we have public money we are spending on innovation, then we should spend it there where innovation goes to the market and nowhere else. And that's, I think, that's feasible when you have structures which have to earn their money on the market. Then they will behave like somebody who's acting in the market.
Yeah, I have to confirm the fact about the fund in Berlin with a little bit of a joke. There is a saying that lots of London VCs use, which is, if you want to have fun, go to Berlin. Yeah. You know. But effectively, I mean, in a way, what I see in contrast to Berlin, and I know both ecosystems fairly well, I would say that London has become a much more cutthroat type of a startup environment in a way. But interestingly enough, it has become that only because there is, or there has been in the last couple of years, an incredible surge of early stage money happening in London. And that's where you can almost tell by national character in terms of how different governments try to take care of their funding, right? So UK invents this investment scheme. It's two parts, the small entrepreneurial investment scheme and entrepreneurial investment scheme. And how they essentially do it is they say, you know what, Silicon Valley, part of the success rate of Silicon Valley is the fact that it is within the DNA of the sort of first generation of entrepreneurs, it was to fund and support the second generation of entrepreneurs. And those generations sort of, made their steps from, well, probably from 60s or probably, I don't know, maybe even before that. Euro knows it better. But that inherent trust in the genius of the entrepreneur was in a way important, and it carried on and improved every generation. So, government in the UK looks at that and says, well, amazing. So what we have to do, we have to trust people that have, essentially made their money, and we have to give them incentives to invest in the next generation of their startup. So they invent this scheme, which is essentially a tax relief scheme. So a certain percentage of the amount you invest into early stage companies gets deducted from your tax benefits. So, and that has worked really well. It has worked actually so extensively well that I can just tell you from the experience of my company, where we work with right now with 30 startups from London, the typical initial investment range increased by almost 300%. So we went from 50 to 70K in pounds, but right now it's 150 just because that's the limit for the small investment scheme. And what I like about that particular sort of approach is just the fact that when they say seed money, they actually mean, seed money. So it's, you cannot put toothpicks in a sniper rifle and think you're going to achieve anything, right? So you want to throw the seeds and essentially realize that you're building the ecosystem statistically, not case by case. Whereas when you come to, for example, let's take a Slovenian fund of entrepreneurs, right? I would say it's much easier to get probably round A money from a tier 1 London VC than it is to convince someone anywhere in the world. And that again comes back to, the Germans will send the structure, very technical, institutes around there, and the institutes will obviously make the right decision or else, right? English will say, oh, well, we're a merge consolidation, we'll throw the money around and something will surely grow up. And we will just say, no, we'll invent so many processes that you'll lose or the will to live after step 2. And funnily enough, if you ask a lot of the very nice and successful Slovenian startups about how they feel about that, what would be the answer? I don't care, because we never tried. So in a way, you are slightly less important, I would say, even than what all of us want to believe, in a way, in terms of the regulatory and governmental strength, right?
About what? Important.
About your actual influence on the success rate of startups or building the ecosystem.
Okay, no. I like this because what I figure out and what's going on, at least in Slovenia, but also I would say also in part of the Europe, is the big issue that we do not link innovation to the entrepreneurship, and this is the big problem. This is actually the innovation is linked to the science. It's not linked to the entrepreneurship and startups. And this is the moment that what we have to do now, it's to make this distinction, not distinction, it's innovation is about entrepreneurship, it's about the market. And we do not have this, and this is why we have all these problems. And why startup communities doesn't care about anything, which is bad for Slovenia.
I just wanted to say, this was great. So one thing, for example, you were saying that kind of first generation feeds second generation. So for example, in our group we have, and in groups of older professors where kind of their students go create companies and then they sell them off, they basically come back to Stanford and they say, I'm looking for my next gig, can I just come stop by? And we usually give them an office and say, yeah, you are welcome, come here, see what we are doing, and if there's anything, take it. So we are part of that process of kind of one generation coming back, raising up the next generation, searching for ideas that can be commercialized. Because kind of we as a university, we are not there to commercialize things, right? We are there to develop new science, new technology, and then that goes out. So that I thought kind of happens very nicely by kind of people coming and going. So kind of even we have people who are not students come, stop by, some people even sit there and then go and do their next thing. And then students know what's going on, they feel excited, they join, and so on. Kind of the whole thing kind of fuels itself through that. And then another thing I wanted to touch upon was this, somebody said, being on the market and so on. And I think kind of we are, even as a university, pretty much on the market, right? And here's one way how we are on the market. A university only pays us 9 months a year, okay? So 3 months a year I have to find my own salary. And everyone, even a full professor, they have to figure out where they get 3 months of salary. Or they can go on a 3-month vacation, that's fine, but that's embarrassing. So it's kind of, right? So it's better to go on a paid 3-month vacation than an unpaid one, right? But that means that somewhere we have to find 3 months of our salary, either through industry or figure out something, right? And then the other thing I wanted to say is, for example, the way university kind of encourages us is that they give us 1 day a week where we can either consult or work on a startup. And all we have to do is just disclose what we are working on and how much time. So we just tell the university, hey, I'm spending a day a week here, and the university says, fine, go do it. And then, before we were talking about kind of mixing of people, I think one benefit of American universities is that we operate on a campus, right? So all the departments are together, which means that students from various departments can take classes in every other department. Another big difference is that our curricula is like completely flexible. I think at Stanford you can get your degree 9 billion different ways. So basically everything is flexible. And this means that we are not kind of graduating 100 computer scientists who are all the same and went through the same coursework. Everyone can kind of individually tailor their coursework based on their interests, right? So we can have people who'll be great iPhone app developers, we can educate people who'll be great scientists and professors, and they are all part of the same program because we allow so much flexibility. This also means, because there's so much flexibility, that we as professors cannot teach something that's not interesting, because nobody will choose our courses and there's no one to teach to, right? So that's another difference. The other difference is also that because we are offering these courses, students, for example, from many different departments take them, and just kind of few interesting statistical bits. So computer science, so at Stanford, 96% of all the undergraduate students take at least one computer science course, all right? So we have courses that cannot grow because everyone is taking them, right? So kind of these computer science courses have become kind of a glue of the university where students meet, talk to each other, and so on. So everyone who's kind of graduating from English, history, or anything else, they would kind of take a computer science course and so on. I'm teaching kind of graduate courses on data analytics. I have 400 students from 11 different departments. I make them write Hadoop jobs, right? This is kind of highly technical thing, but kind of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. and that's good, right? So there's lots of interest and lots of flexibility, and students, not just in science, kind of looking to do industrial things, but students also in science, they really want to know computational methods, right? So in biology, in chemistry, in material science, and so on, right? And because we are on a single campus and allow students lots of flexibility, I even had, for example, in my data mining course, I had someone from the music department. I don't know why they were there, but they passed my course, right? And it didn't hurt them. So that, I think, is an important difference. And then also our promotion process is very different than what people elsewhere do. So we have no points and things like that. All we do is kind of interesting. They create this big table where they ask 15 people to rank 5 people. One of those 5 is me. And then you just compute the average rank, and that determines whether I'm able to stay at the university or not, right? So it's more about through reputation and recommendations and kind of explicit ranking of, I don't know, my peers that then determines that. So it's not about on the amount of stuff we publish, but it's more on the impact we have to the scientific or industrial community. So there are all these kind of little bits that I think at the end up to why Stanford is what it is and how it works. And I'm still kind of discovering these little bits and pieces, but it's very kind of nicely done and makes lots of sense, and kind of incentives are very nicely aligned so that we do good work and be rewarded for it and so on.
A little more than 10 minutes still. We close. Any common question from the audience? While waiting for it, there is a very good video on YouTube on actually the history of Silicon Valley, how it all started, where the first funding came from. It's by Steve Blank, The History of Silicon Valley, or something like that, if you search it. And it is related to the government did give the first push through transistors, radar, some sort of army. It's a really good story, but once it starts rolling, then it's rolling on itself. No questions. Then I would... Sorry, didn't see, sorry. Yeah, Mike in the back.
How's it going? I'm interested in what are each of your maybe favorite failures? We've already heard one story of failure, but obviously you can learn a lot. But what was something that maybe stood out, for each of you in the past that you've learned from?
Who goes first?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long list of failures actually that shaped the way I am right now, and it could be personal ones. I mean, it's not the first time that I'm married, but I want to spare that here. Although that might be the most interesting story I could tell. The biggest failure, which actually, the thing that basically transformed how I felt about business is when I tried to start my own first startup as a lawyer. I developed a platform for trademark applications, and I thought that would be a brilliant idea to offer it for really low money. And the idea was that we were leveraging the databases of the German Patent Office and did a little bit of text mining, and were able to create applications within seconds and file them within seconds. The only problem was that, I told you this story yesterday actually, the only problem was that clients would always behave as clients. They expect the lawyer to act as a lawyer, not as a platform. So we sold them an application for 99 euros, but they were asking for services for 300, 400, 500 euros. So we ended up being the most successful trademark law office in Germany in 1 year, filing around about over 1,000 applications, but it nearly ruined me because I wasn't able actually to pay the people who have to work on that applications from the money I've earned. So that's where I learned that a good business plan is something you should think about. Although first of all, I thought, well, things would just go fine. I have a brilliant idea, yeah, and it will work out. It ended that I quit my job as a lawyer, not because I was sued or something like that, but I said, okay, let's do it right, yeah, and not try it again as a lawyer, but try it again as somebody who wants to start a business. But that's something which was, I mean, that's something usually when you tell something in Germany like this, people say, ooh, should we give them any money? But that changed, actually. I must say that people are now more appreciating when you are transparent about what you've done in your past. And as long as you not went bankrupt, that's something which is still a big problem in Germany, but then things usually work out. Yeah? But that's my story about failure.
Sure. We fail all the time, right? As scientists, you're not doing good work if you don't fail. If you kind of don't fail, then it's clear what's there to do. And kind of given that I work in data analytics, it's very important, for example, for us many times when we start kind of looking at the data, trying to figure out what's going on, many times we have this kind of personal hypotheses, prejudices, things like that, and we are always wrong. So, and kind of you have to let, this is kind of very, from my own field, kind of you have to let the data speak, right? But what this means is that you have to be able to iterate very quickly and kind of, I think when we were talking about failure, it's not failure for the sake of failing. It's really like, if you are not failing, then you are kind of trying something that is too easy, right? And the art is how to do something where, you won't fail for sure, but you're kind of, there is some probability of failure, but there's also some probability of success, right? So we want to be doing things that, first two tries you'll fail and the third time you succeed. If it's one of, 10,000 tries that you will succeed, that's a bad failure. So having a sense of where's the boundary and where you can kind of push it forward, I think that's the context in which I would understand failure.
I think failure is part of life. It's every day you're failing at one thing or the other. But I think what's of essence is that how small that failure is. Are you failing for small things quickly? What was pointedly said, and what are you learning out of it? If I look at my very first, that I was out of US way back. That was in the mid-70s. Came back to India to start an enterprise. I'm first generation entrepreneur. I was trained in many places to make gear cutting tools, and nobody would accept the tools which I made. I went to all the car companies. I would stand on the shop floor, have them try it out, but they still would not accept it because India was not making tools. So that was my first major thing which sort of wanted me to look at things differently. And since then, I would say in today's environment, which is highly volatile, highly unpredictable, highly uncertain, you can't have a business plan that we make fails literally on a quarterly basis. But then you have to accept it. Though your board members have to accept it in a way that you know clearly what is the element which is going out of whack, and subsequent to that, how are you going to look at it? I think it was Nassim Taleb who sort of gave this thing about this quick failures, is that it's not literally a kind of a same kind of failure if you were to jump from a 30-meter once, or you would jump 30 times from a 1 meter height. So it's not linear. So very quickly the body can adapt. You can know that you can jump 30 times, but you definitely can't do a multiple and linearly say that I'll jump from 30 meters once. So that's the kind of learning that, and I think that's what I've tried to share as a value system within the company, and definitely for the young son who came from Carnegie Mellon to set up his own startup.
Well, my story is not so complicated, but it's actually changed my life in 1996, I think. I was trained by the Israeli guy on how to be an agent, how to sell business to business, and I thought, I'm really young, I can do everything. And then I went to Hong Kong with, I will not talk about the Slovenian companies that I represent there, and I said, I will sell everything because I'm so good, I can put things on the paper and people will read, and then I will come there and I will sell everything. Of course, I didn't sell anything. And this actually tremendously changed my life. It's selling and talking to the people, and innovation is not about dealing only on the, in the virtual world. It's really about talking to the people and working in the community which understand you, and then you can do things. And my career go completely in another way, no agency anymore.
Okay. Mine is going to be slightly politically incorrect. Again, yeah. One of our startups, one of our client startups, the night of the story, they started off essentially building a subscription service for people that have taste for high-value liquor, right? And their initial offering was this small, nice tasting packs of 5 different, sometimes whiskeys or rums and stuff like that. And they went out with it on the market, and it looked well at the beginning, but somehow along the way, just growth, there was growth in there, but it slowly started to sort of go down. There was a curve of diminishing yields or whatever it's called. And we brainstormed, what the hell should we do in this particular case, right? I said, well, maybe let's just try something that's just sort of natural and add on to those tasting packs. Let's try to actually add on some, almost like a flash sale concept, but for the big bottles, right? And suddenly their business went like this. And obviously the founding out of that is small alcohols, small companies.
I should not be exempt, so I will also give you an answer. But first, do you know about the Fear and Fail conference? It actually started last year with Jose. Okay. But my answer is going to be a little more sort of a diplomatic / metaphysical. I fail every time when I try to find a bulletproof way how not to fail. Now we have a couple more minutes. Now, just a short comment on something which I actually wanted to have as a last round. The whole R&D and innovation and technology and so on does not yet happen by itself, at least until we get to the singularity point or to the Matrix or Terminator scenario where technology is developing on its own. Until then, people are of utmost importance. And we did touch a little bit the sun in Silicon Valley, the fun and the Berlin club scene and so on. Now, 2 days ago, a guy that a lot of people in Slovenia know, Žiga Vapotić, who was also in one of the teams competing and so on, he announced his new job as a talent acquisition specialist at Outfit 7. Outfit 7, one of the very successful startups with Slovenian founders. And I talked to a couple of guys, and they are sort of sucking up good talent in Slovenia and also around. What does it take to get top talent into wherever you need it? University, startups, Stiftungs, companies. Short comments on this, and then we'll wrap it up. Sun and Fun obviously covers it, yeah.
No. So, for example, we really heavily recruit PhD students, and we kind of bring them in, and they meet professors, and we talk to them, and so on. So, getting good talent is always the kind of the hardest part. But the way you get good talent is to already have good talent there, right? So, kind of, don't start hiring bad people. Once you have good and fun people, other fun people will try to join. So the worst thing is to kind of get a bad person in your team, and then kind of you are doomed. I'm also doing a startup now, so trying to kind of hire for that as well. And that's also very competitive in the Silicon Valley. So we are joking that they're throwing Porsches at programmers right now. So everything is exploding. But if you have a good team, if you are passionate about what you are doing, good people will join you, and kind of then if you are on an upward trajectory, things go well.
Absolutely the same experience. If you get the first one and the second one, then the third one, the fourth and fifth will join, definitely. But what you have to do then is really to make them feel comfortable and to make them fun and exciting about what you are doing. And exactly, when you get the first one, which is bad, might be a big problem, in particular in a startup phase.
See, this is possibly the most challenging question or the most largest one single issue that we face. And I can tell you that it's very easy to have some kind of a textbook answer to this. But I'm afraid I don't have that. How I have found is that good people also hit their ceilings. And as a promoter and as a first-gen entrepreneur who started from scratch, to approximately 200 million overall group. At each, I think we are today at the fourth or the fifth curve. And at each curve, I thought that I had the best guys and they hit their ceilings. And it was emotionally draining for me to have them leave the company. It was more emotionally draining than any of the tasks I've ever done. Because one invests a lot in the people, both in terms of skills and that, of course, but as emotions go there. And then to say that, and for them to accept that at this part of the curve you were absolutely fine, you were great, but now in this curve you don't fit anymore. And that has happened numerous times. So it's a great thing to get good people, but those people are for that, and that's how the MNCs actually function better, because they know they have huge pools of people. They can move the people around. I mean, today this part of this, let's say this footprint, this geography needs this. So this is the guy, for the right guy for this fit. So you send him there. This guy is good for a startup, so you fit him here. This guy is good for a little bit of second level of maturity, you fit him there. But for a mid-sized company, that's not there. So do I have the answer? No, I don't. Only thing is that we'll still keep investing in people. We'll do that very honestly. We'll always keep the dignity of the people and their self-image, even when we ask them to leave. And I have, by my own experience, I have actually paid people to sit at home for more than a year. And not junior people, very senior people.
Okay. My experience is mostly just limited to Slovenia. I would say rule number one, don't hire a recruiter. It's very simple. What it means is, as an entrepreneur, you have to be hands-on when you're actually trying to get good talent. Probably the next thing would be build a strong sense of purpose and communicate it quite a lot. Purpose is more important than the mission, vision, whatever. It gives meaning to why you exist. And especially in our field, in a way, that's almost sometimes more important than money, which is really important. Point number three, I think this is the most difficult one. Try to build a sustainable or stimulating internal ecosystem, something that people can actually put their trust into it. Something where, anybody ever heard about Peter's principle? That in the end, the companies always, become stable when people are sort of dumb enough to be promoted again. So how to avoid that is really crucial, because otherwise, even if you'll get good talent initially, they're going to move away really, really fast. And well, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I will also come up with three things, probably already mentioned, only rephrased. First point I'd say is inspiration, provide inspiration. That could be inspiration by environment, by a team, by whatever. Second is challenge. High potentials want challenges. They want something they can put their hands on, and they want to have that good feeling if they solve the problem. And the third thing is indeed trust. Trust in your people and allow them to make mistakes. Walk what you talk. Not only tell everybody failure is cool, but when your employee fails in something, and it's not outright stupid, but it's just something which could happen, then try to find a way to let the person learn out of it. And I have always had the experience that the next time, those are the most avid employees you can have to make a difference. So it's just the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, since we were the last session today and also of the event, it's okay that we were running 6 minutes late. And now a really short wrap up. I will use 3 words of the last 2 panelists. I trust that this panel did have some purpose and provided some inspiration. And the summary would be we should all fail fast and often in order to learn while having fun, and then the sun will shine. Thank you very much.